She lost a tooth today and came down, and I asked her if she put it in her tooth fairy pillow that hangs on her doorknob. And she said, yes, I did. And then she paused a minute and she said, Mama, are you the tooth fairy? And I was in the middle of making my breakfast. And this is why I'm late. And it was the first time she ever asked me directly. And I put down my spatula and I said, do you really want to know the answer to that? And she thought for a minute. And then she said yes. So I walked over to her and I wrapped my arms around her shoulders and she wrapped her little arms around my waist. And I looked down at her and I kissed her forehead and I said, Mama has worked very hard to make sure that you've had the magic of a tooth fairy for all these years. And I was prepared for, the emotional backlash and all that of that kind of thing. And she just squeezed me and she was like, so you're the tooth fairy? And I said, yes. And she says, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me you were the tooth fairy? And so I said, you never asked me before. And what do you know if you ask Mama a question? And she says, Mama will always tell the truth. And I said, that's right. So what happened next, I was not prepared for because then she started firing off the other questions. She said, okay, looks me dead in the eye, Santa. You gonna tell me Santa Claus isn't a real person? And I was like, I'm sure he was a real person. And she squints her eyes and she said, was? That means he's dead. That means there can't be a Santa right now. And I said, and she squints her eyes again at me after her eyes go big and she goes, are you Santa too? And I said, yup. And then it was the Easter Bunny. I said, yup.